This is The Good Government Show.
People are really interested in seeing how their food is raised and grown, and people want things that are clean. I've worked in state government, was a congresswoman, and now in federal government. I would tell you the one thing that we need to do is we need to connect more. Good governance starts with honesty. Good governance starts with the ability to work with others. Good governance is about coordinating all entities and stakeholders who are involved and who would feel the impact of something in discussions to move the needle forward. I once had a woman say to me, who is a friend of mine, Cindy, you do all the stuff that everybody knows needs to get done, but we just don't want to do it. And I said to her, and it's exhausting.
Welcome to The Good Government Show. I'm your host, Dave Martin. So think about this. These are just some issues that one particular government agency is working on. Housing, broadband access, food security, summer food programs, renewable energy, battling climate change, and managing the U.S. Forest Service. This is just some of the work handled by, well, you probably didn't guess, it's the US Department of Agriculture. The USDA is actually the agency closest to more Americans because they have offices in every single state. And on this episode of The Good Government Show, I'm talking with Cindy Axne. She's the Senior Advisor for Rural Delivery, Engagement, and Prosperity for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. A former two-term congresswoman from Iowa, she now heads an outreach program for the USDA. She told me a few things I didn't know, like that the USDA Rural Housing Program helps get people into a house of their own. We also talked about a program that feeds some 22 million, mostly kids, food during the summer. That's in the summer when there's no free school lunch option. And we talked a little bit about her growing up and working on a farm. Makes sense. She's from Iowa, and now she's in agriculture. So get ready to hear about the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's coming up on The Good Government Show. The Good Government Show is sponsored by Ourco. That means our community. Ourco has found a way to make government more effective. Ourco provides the OUR platform, and this is an app that blends in-person and digital interactions to connect people with their government, their county, their town, their state. The Ourco app transforms meaningful conversations into reliable data. They can turn results into projects and programs the community has essentially already approved. It's sort of like a flash poll by phone, but without the call and in real time and wherever community members are. Maybe they're at their house or their office or where they're out just talking about local issues. Maybe the choice is between putting in more local buses or expanding the bike lanes. Ourco can get you an answer immediately. With OUR, you can engage your citizens or any group, learn what they want, and build programs and policies that advance your county, your job creators, your constituents. So visit ourco.com, that's OURCO.com, and learn how they do it. And while you're there, book a demonstration. After you get done with this episode, hear more good government stories with our friends at How to Really Run a City. Former mayors Kasim Reed of Atlanta and Michael Nutter of Philadelphia, and their co-host, journalist and author Larry Platt, talk with guests and other mayors about how to really get stuff done in cities around the nation. Check them out where you're listening now or through their nonprofit news site, thephiladelphiacitizen.org/podcasts. Welcome to The Good Government Show. We have as our guest today, Cindy Axne, and she is a former two-time member of Congress from her home state of Iowa. And her current title, I want to make sure I get this right, is Senior Advisor for Rural Delivery, Engagement, and Prosperity. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. So you have a rather august title, Senior Advisor for Rural Delivery, Engagement, and Prosperity. What does that mean?
Well, David, I come from 5 generations of farm families in southern Iowa. And what it means is there's a need to ensure that rural communities across this country have a voice, have someone that will help engage with them to make sure that the services that they receive boost opportunities for them and their families and put more money in their pockets. But also to ensure that the way that we're getting things done for rural America creates more trust, I think, with government, more of an understanding that we're here literally to ensure that there's success in their own communities. And when I took this role, I had them add the word prosperity, because coming from a farm family in a rural community, I know that prosperity is difficult to reach in rural America, and that policies can absolutely impact opportunities for those entire communities because they're very much based on agriculture at some level or another.
So did you have to get up early and feed the chickens and the cows? I mean,
well, listen, I didn't grow up on my grandparents' farm except for summers. And so, yes, in the summers I did, right?
Okay.
And on weekends when we would go down there.
So you've worked a farm?
I've worked a farm.
Okay.
Even on my dad's side of the family, his parents came up from the farm and still bought a plot of land on the south side of town, dressed chickens that they had go down to the farm, get them, dress the chickens. They had a big 5-acre plot where they grew vegetables and fruit, and then they deliver that around town. So I've been around urban farming and rural farming my entire life.
Okay. So you're a natural to be in agriculture.
There's a lot of Iowans, it seems, working out here at the USDA.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. They probably don't come from Brooklyn.
No.
Okay.
Not so much.
So what is, I've read a little bit about agriculture. It seems like you guys give away a lot of money to help people on small farms, on large farms. And then it looks like you're involved in housing as well, energy, other things. Is that all accurate?
Well, the USDA, it was the first department that was ever created. It was created by Abraham Lincoln, and it's called the People's Department because it really is the closest to the people in this country. I can't think of a department that is closer. We protect America's natural resources. Rural Americans do that. We create the food supply for this country and many other countries and assist with trade. So much of what this department does is integral to everybody's lives in this country. We do a lot. And it started with Abraham Lincoln saying, I'm going to name this for what this is. And we're the only department on the entire National Mall, just so you know. And we have a garden out here. It really visually expresses the importance of what this department, the United States Department of Agriculture, and all of the things that it does, exactly what you said, from forestry, which a lot of people don't really associate with us, to housing and economic development and childcare centers, et cetera, in our rural America. All of those things come through us when Congress passes legislation that deals with these issues. And so we are close to America in every way possible.
You mentioned something about the fact that USDA buys fire trucks. Can you explain that? I wouldn't associate fire trucks with the USDA.
Right. Well, so we have our Rural Business Cooperative Service, which really is about the economic engine of rural America, partners with communities across the country to ensure that they've got the opportunities there that are more readily available, honestly, in urban areas because there's more funding. And so one of our opportunities through grants is for firefighters to be able to have a new truck, or there's many things that can be done. It could be an ambulance for those responders. It could be something for another important community entity there, like a library. So we have a lot of work that we do with I would wager what people really associate local communities with, which is, your police force, your firefighters, your libraries, all of those things that are so important to keeping communities growing, safe, and intact. We have grants for those to make sure that those communities can actually serve the people that live there.
You talk about grants. One of the things I noticed in the little research I did, you have a program for loans for beginning farmers and ranchers. So you're helping people start farms?
Yeah. Listen, we are doing a lot to make sure that America has opportunity across the board for our farmers.
There are less farms and less farmers, correct?
Oh my goodness, there are so many less farms, to the tens of thousands of farms that
like
literally
you went into politics instead of staying on the farm.
What's yeah.
I said, yes, you went into politics. Yeah. You got off the farm. But there are less farms. So I guess we need programs to encourage more people to get into it. Are they? Is it working?
Oh, it is working. And it's not just a matter, really, David, of having less farms. It's a matter of the fact that the farms that we have in many cases have had to become so big to work within the big four packers or within the big, the contracted market.
Yeah.
And what that has done, because that takes a lot of upfront costs to do that. You've got to be a bigger farm to be able to be a part of that system. It's really eliminated opportunity for people to jump in. We have young farmers people who would love to be have a little plot of land and farm in the way that they would like to farm, whether it's organic food, whether it's, nuts and berries in California, whatever it is, or whether it is a new product right in a row crop state, like in the Midwest. And so the problem is getting in is really tough because the system's currently set up not for people to be able to enter this like many other industries that you can jump in with a business license and, hang out your shingle. This is not one of those. It takes a lot of funding to be able to get your product to market. And
I would imagine time. I mean, if you're growing corn, you can't just, turn it around tomorrow.
Well, that's right. And, corn, I could go all day on corn.
That's why I picked it, Iowa corn. Apples, if we were from Oregon, maybe.
Yeah. And corn is used for, so many things, whether it's, obviously feeding folks, for silage for sows, which is a huge part of our trade opportunities that we have in this country, whether it's for biofuels. That's what I'm saying. You just heard me right there. We're already talking about markets that are already established. So for folks to get into those, it's tough. And I'll be honest, a lot of young farmers want to get into different things these days. And I love it. And I'm excited about what young people are bringing to the table. And this is also for organic and urban farming as well.
And does that filter down to the local farmers market you see on the corner of any big city?
It does filter down to the local farmers market. And you may have
seen. So we can thank the USDA for the farmers market on Sunday morning in your neighborhood.
Well, listen, there's a lot of people to thank for that. But yes, the USDA is certainly a part of that. And I would tell you that we're really working on enhancing organic opportunities for people across the country, because if you do a poll, people are really interested in seeing how their food is raised and grown, and people want things that are clean. Organic baby food, you look at polling for that one of my rep recently did, who's on ag committee, and it just shows that no matter your socioeconomic status, the parents are buying that because they know it's important for their kids to eat healthy. This is what we're in the business of, David. We're in the business of a healthy America, lowering the cost of food for people across the country, making sure that our supply chains are resilient so we aren't so dependent on others for the things that we need. And that's what we're in the business of here in America. And I would also tell you that USDA is in the business of addressing climate change. And so for the folks who are listening out there that are feeling the impact of those in their communities, we're doing a lot to make sure that we don't just address that through practices related to agriculture, but through opportunities for farmers to actually capitalize in new markets within the climate industry itself, which is out there right now.
I want to go back a little bit to food just for another moment before we go away from it. Let's talk about food security, nutrition security. How is the USDA helping those issues?
First and foremost, we are bringing processing capabilities back to local and regional levels. If folks don't know, let's talk about your meat. Your meat's really controlled by the four big packers, right? And there's a whole contracted chain that goes from the packer all the way down to the farmer and then to the fertilizer that's even put on the land for the silage that's used for the hogs, et cetera. And so we've got a system here that doesn't allow anybody to get in, really controls what farmers get as far as the pricing. And we're done with that because that is contributing to this lack of opportunity for farmers to be in the market. And when we do that, we consolidate, which is what's happened, our food system into a handful of big players. When that happens, people don't have as much choice in the store. People's prices are more controlled as opposed to being able to find better opportunities for their pocketbook. The choices of the products that they get are more controlled. So we're opening this all up. We're seeing places like different
Does that mean finding new places, new markets, or new growers, or new developers? How does that work?
It's working with with folks who are out there already doing it.
Right.
Two things: expanding if they've got a small processing capability, but it's most likely bringing it into the community, because that's the problem. We just don't have them anymore. I mean, I told you where I grew up. That town is called Milo, Iowa, is where my grandparents' farm is. And Milo, Iowa was one of the only places during COVID where there was processing capability for farmers to take their products and get their beef processed or their whatever. And so that place it had so much business, it didn't even know what to do because you may remember at the time, the big four packers were literally they were shutting down. Yep. There was COVID on the lines. We were destroying, killing animals. They used, different words for that. But because the supply chain wasn't allowing that product to get down to the individual, we ended up killing animals. We ended up having people die on the floors of meat packing plants. It's time that we switch this out, right? And that we bring things back to the communities. And what this does, folks, this isn't just about rural. This is about putting money in everybody's pocket and choice in the grocery store.
Talk about choice. I read about a summer program. It's called the Summer Electronic Budget Transfer that gives families money in the summer for kids. Can you explain what this is all about and how this program came to be?
Yeah, well, it's important that our kids continue to get the food that they need over summer. And as you know, we have programs throughout the school year for kids to get food, breakfast in the morning, lunch while they're at school, et cetera. Many times taking home a backpack of food over the weekend, all of that. But when the summer
all of a sudden summer hits and there's no more
school. And so we want to make sure that those kids are fed. Listen, every single data point shows that when children are fed, they learn better, they live healthier lives, they succeed more in life. And so we've got to support our kids all throughout the year. And I'll be honest, it's painful for me to see states that are not accepting this money because to make a political statement, these are our children. I passed out food during COVID at Lovejoy Elementary School, where I grew up on the south side of Des Moines. There was not one break in the cars that came by to pick up the food. My son was there with me, and to see these entire families who literally would not have made it through the week without a program like that, and now knowing some of these families are going to go hungry across the country, this is not who we should be. And so we continue to try and push these out there, but there's only so much that we can do. We can have the programs, we can't force states to take them.
I just want to check with you. It's what I read is this feeds 21 million kids in 34 states, and it looks like the payout is like $2.5 billion in this summer electronic budget transfer program. Does that sound right?
Well, that sounds about right. And per kid, that's pretty inexpensive.
Right. But it's fresh fruit and vegetables and fresh food for the summer for kids who don't have it, right?
Well, that's right. And and I can tell you from my years in Congress and speaking to far too many parents, some of the things that we did to extend opportunities for families like child tax credits and things like this, I've heard people say, this is a difference from me being able to give my kid a bag of chips or fresh oranges. And boy, what a difference that makes in their lives, because fresh food sometimes costs more, right?
Sure.
It's cheaper sometimes to get the crappy processed food that isn't good for your health. And look, we all like that. I like it too. I sit down with my candies at night and a bag of popcorn most of the time.
Okay.
But
what's better than a fresh peach in the summer, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about that. Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned something earlier before we started recording here. The USDA is starting a push to grow our own fertilizer in this country. Tell me why that's important.
So once again, during COVID and as a result of coming out of COVID, we had massive supply chain disruptions. And one of the issues was related to fertilizer. And fertilizer just went through the roof as far as pricing was concerned. And it's basically because we don't produce enough here, right? So we're reliant on other countries. I mean, we need fertilizer for our ag system. And it's crazy that we have to rely on other countries to produce that for them. So no more. And so we are making these announcements across the country where we're not just increasing production capabilities for current fertilizer producers, but developing new opportunities and new factories to produce our own fertilizer. What this does is put more money back in the farmer's pocket because they can control their costs now. They know that with fertilizer produced here, they're going to get a better deal. They're going to know what their price is. It's not going to be so much in flux because we have lack of control over it. And just like things we had to do during COVID with baby formula, when we had an issue with there and the president had to tell people to start producing things, we can tell folks if there's a downturn in something. They're part of the American economic system. We can say, hey, you need to produce more or whatever if we ever get into a thing like we did with COVID again. So we've got to start bringing opportunity here to America. It lowers the prices for our farmers, but it's also a national security issue. And so I think this, like so many of the things that we do at USDA, they impact both of those areas. They're economic drivers, they're supply chain resiliency opportunities, and they're also national security protection. We feed America. It's a really important thing to make sure that we're plugging the holes that cause problems for our country.
I always sort of thought, and I don't know, maybe this goes back to TV stereotypes, but I always sort of figured the Department of Agriculture was some guy in a rural setting out in an office that would drive around to farms and go, hey, you can get 5 more acres of corn this season or something like that. But that's not true. And it's just a small part of the picture. It sounds like the USDA is just nationwide at every level. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. And quite honestly, the only department that has representation in every state is the USDA through our state offices. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And through the Farm Service Agency.
That sounds like good government.
It is good government. It's local and down to the people. Our state directors and the folks that work for them in these offices are constantly out working with the people on the ground, meeting with folks to solve problems. And so we're the voice out there. And I'm really proud that we have that position because somebody has to be out there listening to the people and bringing those issues back to America. And I'll be honest, I think having Secretary Vilsack at the helm here, a guy that I worked for at the state of Iowa when I ran strategy for the state, and then was also my constituent, I know him very well. This man lives and breathes opportunity for this country and understands that our role at the USDA is to not just be what most people think of, which is the farming side of things, but to be a key player in changing the trajectory of our economy and also addressing climate issues at the same time. We're a department that can do both of those and make a huge impact.
So now that you're on the department side, how many times have you said, what is wrong with those people in Congress?
You know what's so funny? I see a lot of my friends. I've got some great friends here. And I said, I find myself always saying, well, Congress needs to be doing this. And, so much of it, it has been really interesting. I know that you've got a lot of local government listeners out there. I've worked in state government, was a congresswoman, and now in federal government. I would tell you the one thing that we need to do is we need to connect more across the board in general. And I would say that up and down the block, from federal to state to local, from Congress to the executive branch.
So how do we do that? What's your solution?
Well, first of all, my solution is I hope that people who run for office that step up are willing to work with other people. I hope that they are interested in finding opportunities for our country as a whole while they work for their particular constituents. But if we don't start working together a little bit more, we're going to continue to see government that really doesn't communicate as well as it can. If we communicate
all right,
better,
so now you're getting into your philosophy of government, which is perfect, because now we've got all that out of the way. It's time to find out what you really think about government from your multiple perspectives. You said you worked in state government. What did you do in state government?
Well, I started out as head of leadership development and training at the state of Iowa.
Okay.
And then I moved into running strategy for the state. I ran things like the state's energy and environment plan and made Iowa #2 in wind production in the country. Texas has overtaken that now, but still up there in the top 3. And really worked. I basically worked with every state agency to craft strategies to move us in the right direction. I sat with the cabinet level folks and coordinated things. Like a good example of what I was talking about for good governance is Undersecretary Vilsack. When we did work on the Office of Energy Independence to make this wind opportunity, and he understood fully that this couldn't just be one office that oversees this. This is a combination of natural resources, Office of Energy Independence, utilities, labor, because we didn't have, we were bringing in people from Scandinavia to work on the big wind turbines when we didn't have, we had to work with community colleges to bring in programs to train people.
Okay, all
so
right.
It's a really good example.
So
of
you've got a good overview of government at the local level, at the state level, at the national level in Congress, and now at the Department of Agriculture. So with all that said, from where you sit, how do you define good government?
Tough question, but I would say from my perspective, first and foremost, we need a good governance starts with honesty. Good governance starts with the ability to work with others. Good governance is about coordinating all entities and stakeholders who are involved and who would feel the impact of something in discussions to move the needle forward. So getting more public involvement in what we do, working with local governments to ensure that what we're putting down there that comes down all the way for them to implement is actually reasonable. When I was at the National Association of Counties event late last year, that's what we would hear from local governments, is that they don't have the structure to put some of the policies in place that would be good for them because there's no funding or people to literally get through the quagmire of paperwork or back and forth tests that need to be done that cost a lot of money and some communities don't have. And so we often put things together via policy in a vacuum without thinking about the people who are on the end user side that need to implement it. And to me, that's one of the most important things that we should be doing. And we need to figure out a better way to get that done. And we should have congressional offices and their district staffs work very closely with folks in those local communities to bring that back to the committees of jurisdiction for whatever legislation that it is and point out to them, hey, here's what I'm hearing from these folks. We need to get this changed. And I'm going to tell you, David, it can work. One of the first bills that I was asked to be on was from Virginia Fox. And she came up to me in the House. I was 2 weeks in. She goes, I heard you're interested in putting more money in our local communities' pockets. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but you know I am. And so I was one of the originals on that bill. That bill was signed into law. It is a piece of legislation that is looking across the entire spectrum of federal government grant processes and creating best practices so that we get to a point where it's going to be a much simpler version for any department, anybody applying for any grant in any department, have a more streamlined process that everybody can use. It's going to take a while for us to get there, but we're starting.
Your first bill became a law. That's impressive. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
All right. Now that you've set that high bar for yourself, how do you judge your success then in delivering good government or, the lack thereof? How do you judge it?
I really judge it by the change on the ground in people's lives, by small business owners who have talked to me saying that this has really changed their opportunity, by, conversation, for example, with a woman out in the suburbs of Omaha, Nebraska, who got one of these grants and is now able to change her life and the life of many people around her by establishing a little local, she got one of these processing grants, but really it's because folks who deliver funding to her, or deliver meat and things to her to sell in her little shop, that helps them get the product to market. And so she's created a new shop there. Now multiple farmers are getting more opportunity with a local place to sell their goods. She's also bringing in people as employees, so she's created jobs. And by the way, she's she's a single mom, and she's now got an opportunity for herself. So this is what makes me say we're doing a good job. Or a friend of mine who had a rare disease, and I was able to work on legislation to include that particular disease that wasn't being researched at National Institutes of Health. And now she's actually part of a conversation with people on a team from the White House, where she is able to literally converse with folks, this woman from Iowa who's got a rare disease, and as part of the conversation. That's what we should be doing. Take those folks' needs to the table and make sure they've got a voice at it.
So how should those people who maybe don't have a voice know if they're getting good government, and how should they hold you accountable?
Well, first and foremost, they should be talking with their congressional members. Members of the House are supposed to be the closest representation to the people that they serve. Go to the meetings. Force these representatives to answer to the questions that you have. I don't care what side of the aisle that it's on. They're supposed to be there representing you. Bring your problems to them. It's how I had 11 of my bills passed in 2 terms. That's fantastic. I'll be honest. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
I was listed on the 2 terms in a row, the no-brainer tax bills that should be made into law, because I listened to people and found out what their issues were. And so go to these meetings, because folks, if they're good representatives, will act on that. And if they're not, you got a chance to find a new one down the road. And so I would tell people, first and foremost, do that. Secondly, I would absolutely say, work with folks at the local level that are federal representatives, like we have in our state offices, and ensure that you know what opportunities are out there. And I would say, in general, I hope we can move away from the statement that I hear far too often: I'm just not into politics. And boy, I hear, I've heard it from my own older son. He votes, but still, he's just not into politics, right?
Yeah, right.
Folks, this isn't politics.
This is the future governor of Iowa. I'm sure we're talking about, right?
This is our everyday lives, and I hope people understand. Stop with the phrase and say, I want to get involved in community opportunities, because that's what government should be doing for your community. It should be providing opportunity for you, your family, your neighbors, and all of the people that live there. And so look at it that way. Change our narrative from this being so politically driven to solving problems and being a part of the community that you're proud of.
So if people feel like, and you sort of answer this a little bit, if they feel like they're not getting good government, if they feel like, they don't have enough meetings with their local representatives, what should they do?
Write op-eds, number one. Make sure that information gets out into the public. Spread the information as much as you possibly can. Get it out into mainstream, I would tell you, because everybody does too much on social right now, and it's kind of, that's in a vacuum. But make hay out of it. I would also ensure, I would call anybody that you think could help you, with that. It's different depending on the issue that you're facing, but express those concerns, bring those up in those meetings, make those things public, and literally just talk to folks. Go to your city council meetings. Go to pay attention to what's happening in newsletters.
But it's hard. It's hard. I don't have the time.
Listen, I get it. I once had a woman say to me, who is a friend of mine, Cindy, you do all the stuff that everybody knows needs to get done, but we just don't want to do it. And I said to her, and it's exhausting, because I've done it my entire life. Whether I fought a road coming through a state park in where I used to live, or for all-day kindergarten in one of the biggest districts in Iowa, or taking it to Congress, or now working, for the president at the USDA to make sure that folks across this country understand the good things that are being done. It's hard to step up. I get it. It's time-consuming. It takes away from other things, but it's necessary. Our democracy's fragile. My goodness, is it fragile? This has been an experiment since this country began, and we're still in an experiment. Look at the rest of the world. See the turmoil that we see in so many places, and realize that we've got an opportunity, an advantage here because of the way that we're structured. So fight for that. Be a part of it. Make sure that your voice is heard. Because if you say you don't have any say in this, or your vote is worth nothing, or this is political and I don't want to be a part of it, you're literally ceding the ground to others to make decisions for your lives. And as I like to tell young people who say,
point.
I don't want to get involved or whatever, I'm like, well, your landlord's involved, making sure that rents are, car manufacturers are involved for the things that, what you're getting in your car and what you're paying for. Food lobbyists are out there for everything you're putting in your mouth. So I think you might want to get engaged because people are making decisions for you that you don't think are happening, and they are.
That's a very good point. So you are for lack of a better word, I'd have to call you a government insider. You've worked at the state level, at the federal level, and you've had elected office. What would you like people to know about how government works that they don't know?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can call me that, but I've been on the outside always. I was a dark horse in my race. I was all this stuff, right? I never. But
you worked in government. You're on the inside.
Well, that's right.
You understand it. You understand how the wheels turn. What would you tell people who doesn't understand that?
I understand it. I keep saying I need to write a book because it is so important for the people in this country to understand how things are happening. My gosh, just take 1 minute to get away from whatever it is, whether it is a book you're reading or the Kardashians you're watching or whatever the heck you're doing with your time. Say, I'm going to commit 15 minutes, twice a week or whatever, to just get more in tune with how something functions and learn a little bit about it, because it is complicated. There are decisions that are being made that people are unaware of. And I got to tell you, we were joking about this the other day. I've been at events where, I'm cutting a ribbon and somebody walks up to me and it's like, as a congresswoman, great to see you, Governor. It's been a year since I've seen you. And I'm like, oh, okay. We're called Senator, where let me just tell you, this happens all the time with all the people I know that are in this industry, so to speak, that there's confusion on who does what. There's confusion about who's responsible for things. There's confusion on the title you even have and what you do for a job for them. So, and that's incumbent on those folks to start figuring out. I'll be honest. It's like, it's not as if there's not information out there for people to learn how this process works. You just got to go find it a little bit. And there's great, if you like social media, there's people out there explaining how to get things done, how government works on social media. Go listen to that. If you just rather read about it, go find a book on it. Go read a book about the filibuster and how it needs to be gotten rid of, because it's ruining half the opportunity for us to pass good legislation. There's books out on that right now.
Give the listeners just sort of one little insider tip about how government works. Here's what you need to know about how this process works and why things are the way they are.
I'm going to start at the beginning because it starts with elections.
Okay.
Our structure allows for a small group of Americans to have a oversized ability to influence what that election looks like down the road.
Yep.
And we need to put in some other framing, I think, so that those types of decisions don't just snowball and go down the road. What I want folks to understand is, like, once something starts, it's almost impossible for it to stop. And so you really need to be in at the beginning, and you need to be a part of this, because whether it's legislation or whether it is, the election process itself, the structures honestly need to be fixed in many ways. When we allowed for Citizens United, when that was passed, where corporations are people too, and then they could put money into elections, our country was really put into a bad position. It should be done away with. It allows too much money to go into our processes, and too much money is in our entire system, whether it's on the election side or on the lobbying side. It's why Americans need to stand up. Folks,
okay.
That's it, David. Let me get to that. The money in the system is controlling more than people think. And they need to put their voices out there, because the only thing people who don't have the money can do is make sure your voice matters. And that's through voting and showing up to press your elected officials to do the work that they need to do.
Good answer. Thank you. So who inspired you to get into politics and to get into government? Who are your heroes?
I don't work that way. I've never been like that.
You have no heroes?
What inspired me?
No one inspired you?
What inspired me was what turned into a 10-mile walk after the 2016 election. I had bronchitis. I thought I was getting a little bit better. I thought I'd go out for 2 miles because I needed to get out of the house, right? I come back 10 miles later and said, I just got to step up. And it really was this idea, David, that I didn't think my family was being well represented and my community wasn't with the people that were winning these elections. And I just said, for God's sake, can do this. Why shouldn't I just step in? I really just started by going out and saying, I just want to be more involved. And then somebody who was running for governor said, will you go out and speak on my behalf as a surrogate? And I said, sure, because I'd worked with him at the DNR.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I had people waiting in line to talk to me after a speech saying, are you going to run for office? Because we like what you have to say. So I would just tell people, if you've got a passion for something, step up. I wasn't inspired.
Is there anyone who inspired you?
No, I don't. I'm not one of those people. I'm not like, okay. I'm so not like, I don't bow down to a lot of people. But I mean, if there's,
well, it's not necessarily bow down as opposed to like, oh, I think.
No, but I guess I'm just not like, that's not who I am. It's hard for me to say. I would tell you if there's anybody that inspired me to know that we can be better as a country, it's got to be President Obama. Because listen, that guy politically, he did do the right thing. He went in Iowa. He was knocking on doors in the tiniest towns, right? Right. That guy went out and listened to people, and he went to office and then
what's it called? A Grassley, where you go to every county in Iowa.
Yes, Grassley does his 99.
Yes,
and he does it every single year. So good for him on that.
So when you were growing up, did you want to be president? Did you want to be governor? Did you want to be the mayor? Were you president of your high school class? Was politics in your future?
No, listen, I was secretary of my high school class.
Okay.
I was definitely heavily involved. I look back at this little thing I wrote in 4th grade about, and I said I was going to be, what was it? I was going to cure all diseases and then become a movie star. So that that was my 4th grade me. But no, I wasn't actually.
Well, you've been on TV, you're on podcasts, so I guess you've had.
Yeah, right. No, I studied broadcasting.
Good.
That's my undergrad, and then my graduate is I have an MBA with a focus in organizational development and strategy.
All right.
So my life has been about process improvement and making things and fixing organizations to run better. So I don't need to. I was never in a place where I've got to be some name. I just want to solve problems. They used to joke around at the state of Iowa that my tombstone should read, "You get shit done," because that's just what I like to do.
Okay. So I know you live in Washington now, but you're from Iowa. I've never been to Iowa. I'm coming out to Iowa. What are we having for dinner? Where are we going? What are we eating? What's a great local Iowa dish?
Well, there's so many, but of course I've got to go with a pork chop. We're known for our pork chops there.
Okay.
And a really good piece of corn next to that.
Good.
So that's a classic. But I got to tell you, we've got great food across the board, and there's some really good Italian in parts of Iowa.
I live in Brooklyn. Mexican. Be careful here, okay?
Yeah. Listen, I think you might be impressed with some of the old school Italian that we had. I've got families from the South Side. We married, my uncles married a lot of Italian women from the South Side.
All right, okay.
And there was a lot of the Bisignanos and all those names that had restaurants. So they're not messing around.
All right. Is there a such thing as an Iowa restaurant in Washington?
I don't think there is such thing as an Iowa restaurant.
Well, like a sort of a Midwest, farm table kind of place. Nothing?
Sure. What's that? I mean, listen, I haven't been, what is there? There's something here called Framers Farm or something like that.
Yeah.
Farmers Framing. They sell a lot of things that we would eat, which is, how I grew up with my grandma with, a big, the open, mashed potatoes on a piece of bread with with pot roast or roast beef on top of that and gravy.
All right. So the name of the show is The Good Government Show. We always like to bring it back to good government. Tell me about a program we haven't talked about yet at the Department of Agriculture you're especially proud of that does deliver good government.
Let me talk housing.
Okay.
I want to talk about our housing because there, in my book, there's nothing more important than having the dignity of a home for you and your family. This is a program that we have that has changed the lives of people across this country by putting a roof over their head. And it allows folks to get into buying a home that they thought they could never purchase, and to give their family that opportunity to grow and possibly have generational wealth as well. So I would tell you our rural housing service is one of the programs that I'm really, I'm very fond of. I was also vice chair of the subcommittee on housing.
This is the Department of Agriculture building or helping people get into homes, to houses.
Yeah. And one of the other issues is we struggle in rural America for developers to come out there and provide housing. So by giving the incentive, to people to have the funding to do it, and working with communities to help bring opportunities out there to develop homes or to refurbish or to buy in like a Main Street. We're rebuilding Main Street America while we're giving people homes. And so it's just a great program. And I just think, to me, that's one of the most important things we could be doing across this country is housing people.
Well, that is a great program, and it's certainly good to give people a home. Cindy Axne, you are the Senior Advisor for Rural Delivery, Engagement, and Prosperity, a former Congresswoman. Great to have you on. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where do you get your news from? Where do you get your state and local government news from? Because that's getting harder and harder. And it's essential to stay updated with your community. And it's becoming increasingly important to know what's going on in other cities and states, because they're likely facing challenges that you're grappling with too, or you're going to face eventually. That's why we'd like to welcome our new partner, Route 50, to the show. Route 50 is a leading online publication covering state and local governments across the country. They've written about states protecting themselves against the rise in cyber attacks, counties using AI to better support citizen services, local responses to crumbling infrastructure and extreme weather, and much, much more. There's a lot there. It's a one-stop shop for issues affecting state and local governments and their residents. And that's you. That's all of us. Do yourself a favor and go to route50.com to see the topics and solutions they cover and learn what other people in government are doing. They also deliver a daily newsletter called Route 50 Today. I see it in my inbox every morning. I check it out, and you should too. Thanks again, Route 50. We're excited to have you on board and being a partner here at the Good Government Show. What is it that county government does? That's the question county commissioners get asked the most. And the simple answer is everything. On the Good Government Show, we're so lucky to have talked with so many county commissioners and other county officials that have shown us how effective county government is. County government dates back to, get this, 1634, making it one of the oldest forms of government in the United States. Think about it. Roads, highways, hospitals, schools, recycling, law enforcement, water, sewers, and most of the county, those services are maintained by the county. That's county government. The National Association of Counties represents all 3,069 counties across the USA. NACo helps county government work better together through things like sharing best practices. When county government works well, that's just good government. The Department of Agriculture does a lot more than just help farmers increase their yields, as I found out. They do a lot, and more importantly, they assist not just farmers, but people across the country on things like getting into their own home or starting their own farm. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to move out west and start a farm, but it's good to know the USDA is ready to help the next generation of farmers. Well, that's our show. Don't forget to like us and review us on all your favorite social media platforms, and share us with your friends, and listen again for another story about government working for all of us. Thanks for listening. I'm Dave Martin. This is The Good Government Show. The Good Government Show is a Valley Park production. Jim Ludlow, Dave Martin, that's me, and David Snyder are the executive producers. Our show is edited and produced by Jason Stershic. Please subscribe, then share us, and like us and review us. That's the best way to make sure we're able to keep telling these stories of our government working for all of us. Then listen to the next episode of The Good Government Show.